The Department of Homeland Security now issuing an urgent warning about the migrant caravan that confirms our worst fears. Jack Davis for the Western Journal reports that the migrant caravans heading for the U.S. border is now confirmed to have more than 500 criminals within them. That's according to DHS officials. During a conference call with reporters, officials said that most of the caravan members are not women and children, despite what you've been told by the left-wing media. Officials said that although women and children are pushed to the front of the group, they are the ones that get the most sympathy. And the most migrants, though, they are young males. NBC reported that DHS has paid informants deep within the caravan to keep officials up to date on the progress of the migrants. Officials estimated that as many as 10,500 people were traveling to the United States in a handful of different caravans, according to the Washington Examiner. Now, Kirsten Nielsen repeated the assertion that at least 500 criminals were traveling within the caravan. She said the migrants, they think they can easily scale the walls that currently exist. Well, they'll be very disappointed when they arrive at the border, which has been hardened by U.S. troops sent there by President Donald Trump. Take a look.
This is a border wall with row upon row of concertina wire. Make no mistake, we are very serious. You will not get into our country illegally. Thanks to the quick work by CBP and DoD in installing wire like this, we now have miles of concertina wire at our ports of entry and elsewhere along our southern border. As we continue to see the arrival of additional caravan members south of our border, I want to take this opportunity to set the record straight on what is currently happening at the border and who we see and what we're doing about it. First, some critics and media have stated that DHS is overreacting to the presence of a few hundred migrants that are thousands of miles or weeks away from the United States. I'm here to tell you today that the reality is that there are currently over 6,200 individuals camped out south of the U.S. border in Tijuana today as I stand here. In Mexicali, there are more than 3,000 caravan members. These two groups, combined with other caravans making their way through the Northern Triangle in Mexico, will result in approximately 8,000 to 10,000 migrants amassing along our southern border. The crisis is real, and it is just on the other side of this wall. Second, some continue to report that the caravan is made up of mostly women and children who are fleeing violence in the Northern Triangle. The reality is that the majority of the caravan that we see is made up of single adult males or teenage males. In addition, we have identified over 500 criminals, to include known gang members, contained in the flow of the caravan. To fuel the sympathetic narrative we continue to see repeated in U.S. media, we know that organizers of the caravan have been pushing women and children and others to the front of the caravan in hope that law enforcement will not engage them.
Can you believe that? I mean, of course, the left-wing media is not going to be telling you these things. All right, they're going to say, oh, we don't believe it. But that's the tactic that's being employed by the caravan, pushing the women and children to the front, and then all the males hide out in back, so all the visual optics are, designed to pull at the heartstrings of Americans. Oh, look at these poor people. Look at these poor moms and their kids. No, it's a ruse. It's a lie. And you just heard it right there from the Department of Homeland Security directly. Now, they state here that these new arrivals will add to the tense conditions in Tijuana, where 6,000 migrants are already waiting for asylum interviews, which take place at the rate of about 100 per day. So basically, you got thousands and thousands of people walking in, and then they have to have a specific interview. That person's information needs to be logged, cataloged, documented, and then they get a court date and they have to follow up, and then what happens? They just disappear. It's the biggest scam ever. Now, Tijuana expects its population of migrants, it may balloon all the way up to 10,000, as you've just heard. This is the exact reason why President Trump wanted a border wall funded. However, illegals, they're going to try to find some way or another to sneak into this country, and we cannot continue to let this happen. Unbelievable. Comment below, and we'll see you at the next report. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
I wonder what Bill Bennett's doing. You think he's shopping after this busy Thanksgiving?
I hope he's looking at a TV camera. You know him. He's Fox News contributor, former Education Secretary under Ronald Reagan, author of a brand new book. It's called The True St. Nicholas, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Bill, how'd you spend your Thanksgiving?
I think you got a picture of our table there at Thanksgiving. We ate at home, and we had Mrs. Bennett prepares there are my two sons on the left and right with their lovely girlfriends, my wife, beautiful wife at the far end, and parents of one of the girlfriends. I don't know what that means, but we'll see.
Oh, I think we all know what it means.
But Steve, Mrs. Bennett, I know you're Cookbook Steve. If I were Donald Trump, I would call you Cookbook Steve. That would be your nickname. But Mrs. Bennett does a practice turkey and then a presentation turkey.
That's fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah, practice turkeys for extra gravy, you see.
Now, Billy, you mentioned the president. He's threatening to shut down the whole border with Mexico if immigration becomes uncontrollable. You say he may actually succeed in that task.
Yeah, well, I think the president has the authority under national security. This has happened before. In 1985, the border was shut down. I was the first drug czar, you might remember. Not then, but a little later. But because of the Kiki Camarena case, this was the DEA agent who was killed. Ronald Reagan shut down the border. And we also did it right after 9/11. This is under national security. The president makes that decision, and it's not an easily challengeable decision. The president has that discretion. So I think he says it, and with this president, when he says it, he usually means it.
Dr. Bennett, the president is not backing down from his argument over Twitter, I suppose, with Justice Roberts. Now, we know there are liberal judges, there's conservative judges, but there are judges that follow the Constitution, and there are judges that follow their heart and their ideology. Tell us whether you think the president is right to pick this fight with the Supreme Court.
Well, he's certainly right, but Roberts really picked this fight. The president's talked about the Ninth Circuit and liberal judges. There's no question about it. If you have eyes, you can see that. If you read their opinions, you can see that. But this is not unprecedented either. And Donald Trump puts himself here in the legacy of Abraham Lincoln, who had a fierce debate with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Roger B. Taney, in the Dred Scott decision, and then in the case of habeas corpus in the Civil War. So this is a fight that John Roberts, I think, didn't want to pick. By the way, when he talks about the independence of the judiciary, I wonder if he tapped Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the wrist when she was criticizing candidate Trump and saying, that he was a fake and a phony, because that's not really above the fray, is it?
No. You make a great point. Let's talk a little bit about your brand new book. It's The True St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas, a real person, but then legends sprang up around him. And your book reminds people about virtue, and you've written all about that, and this particular man.
Yeah, it's a great story. I, like a lot of people, thought St. Nick was just a nickname for Santa Claus. But there's a real guy, St. Nicholas, born in 280 AD. A lot of stories how he comes to be known as Santa Claus, lives through the ages. But the great story, and really this is the Fountainhead story, young man, his parents die, they leave him some money, and he notices that a family of poor people, a man and his three poor daughters, they can't get married because they don't have a dowry. So in the middle of the night, Nicholas, the young Nicholas, goes with a bag of gold, throws it through the window of the home into a stocking. Okay, see where this is going, right? Anyway, that's around 300 AD, and of course the irony is this guy who comes in the middle of the night seeking to be anonymous becomes the most famous gift giver of the world. His story travels all over the world. He becomes known, much revered saint, and makes his way into Europe, all over the world, really. Becomes known as Sinterklaas in Holland, and then becomes our Santa Claus, and then he's discovered by Washington Irving, the great American writer, and then, of course, as you know, by Coca-Cola.
Right.
And that increased his visibility by a lot. But it's a great story.
His feast day is December 6th. My kids actually celebrate it. They put their little shoes out on December 6th and get sort of like a preview of what's to come on the 24th and the 25th. But it's a beautiful story. I hope people get your book. Also, for parents looking, there are actually, my kids watch an animated cartoon cartoon version of it, which tells the story, which might be easier for little ones to get in the mood for. But it is a beautiful story.
Well, if you want to take a break from politics, and even I want to do that occasionally, it's a wonderful story and it's uplifting. It's not comfort food like Steve's book. I mean, we're all just fixated on Steve, but it's a comfort story and it's a great Christmas story.
Buy them both at the same time.
Good for you, December 6th. Good for you. Good for you remembering that.
There you go.
That's fantastic. Dr. Bennett, thank you so much. And if the president renames Steve Cookbook Steve, we will give you full credit.
That's right. Thank you very much.
That would be something. All right,
Okay.
the book is The True St. Nicholas.